All right, hello and welcome everybody to the Dead Draw Gaming Podcast, episode 2. Joining me today are three expert gamers. In the upper right-hand corner, I had to think about that for a second. We have Gabriel Smart. Gabe, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Excited for rotation. Got Vancouver regionals next week, so a lot of Pokemon to be played.
Is that next week? Oh my.
Yeah, next week.
Yeah.
Oh man, time. Okay. In the bottom left corner, we have Andrew Hedrick coming from the Spooky Lighting Place. How's it going?
Doing pretty good on spring break right now, but excited for the events to start coming back up after a little break from them. So should be pretty good.
Cool, cool, cool. And then in the bottom right corner, we got Nick Moffat. Nick, how are you doing on this wonderful Wednesday evening?
Not too bad. Pretty busy with school. I know Andrew's on spring break. Mine's not till the week of EUIC, which is nice though, because I
That
get
is
to
so
spend a little
late.
extra time in London. So
Oh, that's really
yeah,
nice
we do
then.
it really late for some reason. Yeah, so gonna spend most of the week in London, so that should be fun. Hopefully I'll either win Vancouver or if not, win London. So
Sounds good. Sounds good. Cool. We have a lot of stuff we want to talk about today. We're going to try to spend a little bit more time on the Paldean Fates format today because we just had two events happen since the last time we did our podcast because we're doing this bi weekly. And then we're going to spend some time talking about rotation stuff, primarily focusing on the decks that currently exist in our regular format right now, but are improving a lot with the rotation. So we'll talk about all those, and then we'll get to some mailbag questions at the end. But before we get into any of that, I have a serious topic to start us off on here. I want to address the cheating allegations against me that have been coming up lately. For those who didn't see either of the Dead Draw Gaming YouTube channel videos of me playing tabletop with Jake Gearhart, in one of the games I double attached, and in the video that just came out today, I apparently got Ionoed, and then I just didn't put my hand at the bottom of the deck. So I am very sorry for anyone I have hurt. Jake, I am so sorry for what my actions have done to you. I sent the message to Jake. I was like, dude, I'm so sorry, and then he just didn't respond. He just liked the tweet. So I think he hates me now. But yeah, it's my bad. I promise I don't cheat like that IRL. So if you ever play against me, I promise I won't do that. It's just talking while playing is very hard. But so anyway, let's go talk about the real topics of today, which is the Paldean Fate format. We'll start with Utrecht, which just took place not this past weekend, but the weekend before that. There's a lot of things to talk about with it, and I kind of wanted to start before we even get into like who won and top eight and all that kind of stuff with the kind of the meta share with how it all worked out. We had some predictions last time. We had Gabe was saying that Zard would be winning. Andrew said Guardy, and we all kind of expected Guardy to be like around the same, like 10%, and maybe getting a little bit higher potentially. And it ended up being 9%. But what was kind of the surprising number one is Roaring Moon. Why do you all think Roaring Moon was the number one meta share deck for this event?
I feel like Roaring Moon, like overall in general, has been gaining popularity over the last few months, last couple months. We especially talked about it last time too, with the kind of capturing a lot of the Miraidon players.
Yeah.
Have switched over to Roaring Moon. And it's got more popular. I think like the bigger surprise with that is Charizard not being the number one anymore, and instead being overtaken by Roaring Moon, which is pretty surprising.
Yeah,
I
and,
feel
and
like
taken over by Tina too. It ended up being number three.
yeah, Charizard going down is like pretty surprising. I kind of thought it would just stay the number one throughout the rest of the format, so that's pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that Roaring Moon, it's very easy to learn some of like the basic skills of it, which I think attracts to a lot of like newer players. I think that like when a newer player has an option to build a deck, they're probably not going to be looking at something like Gardevoir or Lost Zone Toolbox. Obviously, there are some that decide to do that, but I think a lot of them are trying to find something that's a little bit more simple to play and has kind of straightforward strategies. And I think the deck in general is just very strong. I think that like it's a deck that a lot of casuals are going to play, people that might not necessarily try hard as much at tournaments, and also is a deck that just inherently is so powerful that like you're going to see a decent amount of like notable players also play it. Like I think at Knoxville, I think like JW Krewall got like top 16 with it. Like he's already won a regional championship this year. Jesse Parker got like top 32. So there are plenty of notable players that have been playing the deck. And I think yeah, like I think a lot of the Miraidon players just kind of transferred to being like Roaring Moon players. The deck takes decent matchups against quite a few things in the format. I think the Charizard matchup is actually relatively fine for Roaring
Mm-hmm.
Moon, whereas Miraidon can oftentimes struggle against Zard if Zard gets like fully set up, especially the peony version. And I think the deck really has a shot versus everything, and it's just very consistent. So yeah, it's an easy deck to learn. It's fast. It does what it needs to do. It has a pretty simple strategy, and I think those are some of the reasons as to why it's become the most popular deck in the format.
Makes sense.
I think the deck is fine. I don't think it warrants being the most popular deck in the format. Like
Sure.
I think Charizard being the most popular made sense, both relatively straightforward to play. I do think Charizard's probably a stronger deck overall. But people are going to play what they want to play.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think in general, Guardy was about where people expected, maybe a little bit lower. Zard just kind of falling the way it did. Tina being second is like 13% is not really surprising. Makes a lot of sense. I think the more surprising thing was that there was like 8% unclassified decks on the day one meta share. I'm assuming one of those was the Tord Zard box. I guess that's what people are calling it. So I want to ask you all: did you all try this deck out on your own and have any thoughts on it?
I did. I tried it out a little bit. I played a little bit on stream a couple weeks ago, about like a week and a half ago, and I don't think it's very good. I think it's like a solid deck. I think Tord's a incredibly talented player. I think that Tord could play a tier 3 deck and have a chance at, making it like into day 2 top 8, or even, like winning the tournaments. I think that the deck takes advantage of players that don't necessarily know exactly like what's inside it. Like he has, like the Metacham, he has the Urshifu, he also has, like the Mawile as well. There's just so many random things that you can steal games with. However, I don't necessarily think this deck will see success again because people know about it now. It's been very public on what the deck does and kind of like what it's capable of. And I think that as time goes on, the deck loses a lot of what makes it special, which is, kind of the surprise factor. I don't see a reason to play that version over the regular version of Charizard. I was watching Tord's winning in, and Tord definitely could have lost that set pretty convincingly if a couple things towards opponents chose just kind of like they just simply played a little bit, like differently. And like that's obviously what kind of the advantage of that deck had was people didn't know necessarily how to play versus it, but now
Mhm.
people should kind of know what's in the deck. So I think it loses what makes it special, but like it's fun, but I just don't think it's better than just straightforward Charizard.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was mostly just carried by Tord, being a really good player. And also, I mean, he probably knew exactly every purpose that he put the card in the deck for, right? So he
Right.
was
Yeah.
probably figuring out all of the lines against everyone who didn't know what the cards were in the deck for in his deck. So he would pull off some crazy plays. Probably it's pretty cool, but I really do not expect it to see success at any other tournament played by any other player.
Yeah, I
I
think.
think the
I'm sorry.
concept of putting Urshifu and Charizard in the same deck is solid. I don't think you need a lot of the other things. Like you could probably cut the Inteleon line and things like that to make room for more consistency, and I think that could be a pretty solid deck, but I haven't put any time into it really to be able to tell.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think the kind of the surprising confusion factor is probably the biggest reason Torrette had so much success with it, beyond just him being a very good player, obviously. I think I saw on Twitter someone was saying like I think the entire point of the deck is just to confuse your opponent enough to forget that you have Mawile, and then just win the game at the end with it. And we definitely saw that Mawile put in a lot of
Like
work.
kind of, yeah. I mean, they kind of have to bench it, right? If you've got an Urshifu threat. So
Yeah, it's scary. Uh, Definitely
that's
interesting
why I say it
combos.
makes sense to have the Urshifu with Charizard
Mhm.
and the Mawile, but you could probably get away without a lot of the other stuff and still do pretty well.
For sure. So we don't think it'll be common at all at Vancouver. Do you like should you even like bother prepping against it at all? Maybe just like playing a game against it so you know what it's in it.
Nope.
Yeah, I've not played any games against it, and it doesn't really seem like it had too much success in Brazil either.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if anyone even tried it at
Yeah.
Brazil. And then yeah. So the big thing that won at the end of the day was Mew, and Mew's something I wanted to talk about specifically, even beyond it winning the event in a format where Zard is going down the way it is, where Zard's just not as popular. That it makes a lot of sense for it to do well at this event, and it makes a lot of sense to play it still like coming into Vancouver. So I just want to get everyone's thoughts on kind of where Mew is right now.
I think the one of the interesting things too is the Mew that won is Fusion Mew, right?
Hmm.
So and that like kind of deck has a better Roaring Moon matchup. Like the DTE Mew like really struggles against the the version of Roaring Moon that has the resurges, it's going to be really hard to brick it in the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
It's going to get set up and it's going to kind of run you over. The Fusion Mew has a better chance because you can set up your board potentially with double one prizers and take a 2-prize knockout with a 1-prizer and kind of fix the prize trade in your favor. So I think because you have a much better chance to win the Roaring Moon matchup, that makes the deck have a lot more potential, especially with the decline in decks like Charizard, as well as if you're giving yourself a way to beat Roaring Moon. You actually have pretty good matchups across the board. I see he included some Lost Cities, which definitely helps the Gardevoir matchup. Mew's obviously always pretty good against Giratina, so I don't think. Yeah, I think he actually Fusion Mew kind of makes more sense at this point in the format than DTE Mew if you're going to play one of them. I'm not personally a huge fan of Fusion Mew, but I could definitely see the upside to playing it at this point in the format.
Yeah, I think that Fusion Mew is probably better right now. I think the DT Mew saw a decent amount of success when Roaring Moon really wasn't, that popular of a deck. Because right when Paradox Rift came out, Roaring Moon didn't really see a whole lot of success for those, first, couple of tournaments, and like DT Mew saw plenty of success, making it into a couple top cuts, I believe. But after time, kind of went on, people started to play Roaring Moon, the percentages went up. People started attacking Spiritomb again. A lot of decks were also running the Tomb. You kind of fell off for a couple of tournaments, but I think that Fusion Mew is actually a very, very good deck right now. I think it's actually pretty well positioned for the upcoming Vancouver Regional Championships. It's good versus things like Roaring Moon. It's good versus decks like Tina as well. Things like Miraidon. It just has naturally always kind of had a slightly favored into Miraidon. The matchup's definitely close, and it also does really, really good against decks like the Chen Pao. That's one of the big
Right.
decks that Mew has always kind of notoriously done well versus, and especially since Owen just won the Dortmund Regional Championship with Chen Pao. Chen Pao has seen quite a spike. Also, I think with Charizard, kind of going down a little bit in popularity, it's still kind of hovering around that 13-14%, but it's not necessarily the most played deck at every tournament anymore. That also bodes very well for Fusion Mew because one of Fusion Mew's biggest issues was the Charizard matchup originally, and now if Charizard is going down, then that potentially makes Fusion Mew an even better play. So yeah, it's pretty good.
I definitely like it a lot. I think it's very strong right now. Probably my second choice after Miraidon.
Yeah, it just seems like everything's kind of lining up for it with the way the meta's shaking out right now. And this is actually the last event for Mew, so even more reason for people to bring it out, I guess. So I guess the takeaway here is you should probably respect Mew if you're going to Vancouver, just because it seems like a really strong play, and it is the last time it'll ever get played. So yeah.
That's true. Yeah, I think there probably will be at least a decent number of people who want to play Mew for the one last tournament, especially
For
the
sure.
Mew mains.
Yeah, I don't even know what the
I
percentage was
do.
before, but yeah, I'm sure it'll go up. It could even hit like 8% or something.
Yeah, it usually hovers around there. I do have Spiritomb in my Miraidon deck right now. I've been considering swapping to Drapion because it's better specifically into Mew. But Spiritomb helps a lot versus decks like Roaring Moon and Charizard
Sure.
as well. So
Yeah.
I've kept that in there for now. But yeah, particularly against Fusion Mew, I don't think the Spiritomb is going to do too much for me.
Right. Makes sense.
So I would definitely be scared to play against the Fusion Mew as opposed to the DT.
Cool. Yeah. I think we can go on then to the next event that happened, the Brazilian Regionals, where Control got its first win in I think a really long time. This is obviously this version of Control the first time it won, and it's a deck that actually this version of Control, it wasn't strictly Snorlax Stall. It was the Pidgeot with just one Snorlax and a bunch of other cards. This specific version of the deck performed extremely well at Utrecht. 6 of them placed between 6th and 51st. The deck did extremely well at Utrecht. A bunch of people played it at Brazilian Regionals, and it won the event. So obviously, this is a different style from what has been kind of popular beforehand, but it's not a new version. That like people have been playing Pidgeot Snorlax stuff to recent events as well for a lot of this format and last. But what are your thoughts on kind of this Control version? How scared should people be of this?
I would never be too scared of Control. I don't think Control takes up a big, like a very big like percentage of the format. I think like even like at its peak, like I think like heading into EUIC, for example, like Control will probably be at its peak just because of how hyped it's been. Like for example, there I don't think it's gonna get over 6%, and like especially for Vancouver, right? I mean, I would expect it to be maybe 3 or 4% like max. Going specifically about the Pidgeot variant, I do think the Pidgeot variant is a little bit better against things like Gardevoir, because you're never really going to miss anything because you have the Pidgeot to be able to search, like whatever out like that you need. I think it's pretty decent into Tina as well. You have a shot versus Tina because you have things like the Radiant Charizard paired up with the Defiance band. So you have a chance against that because you can spam Radiant Charizard over and over again. However, I do think you are weaker against decks like Miraidon, for example. I think that Miraidon is able to take advantage of the fact that you have Pidgeot and have like an easy like gust effect. And the deck is also a little bit more inconsistent. The deck does have some clunkiness issues at the beginning because your entire engine is based off a stage 2, whereas just the regular variant of stall is just a little bit more streamlined. I wouldn't even call this necessarily a stall deck. I'd probably just call it control.
Right. Yeah.
I think they're probably separated. I think that this deck is way more built around, just trying to control your opponent with things like Luxray, whereas just a regular Snorlax variant is just kind of sitting there using counter catcher. So I pretty much think they're almost entirely different decks.
Yeah.
With somewhat similar strategies, but they play very differently for sure. But I think that personally, I like the Pidgeot one a little bit more at the moment. I think you have more answers to things, and I think it's just a cool deck in general. And I think that more people will misplay versus the Pidgeot version just because there's so much more kind of going on. And I think it's better at beating the counters, but it is a little bit more inconsistent. So there is that, kind of inherent risk that you run with just not being able to set up.
Yeah, I was playing Giratina against this new control deck, and it was actually pretty confusing my first couple of games. I kind of had no idea what I was doing. They have so many different options, right? They can go aggressive with the Luxray early. They have Radiant Charizard plus Defiance Belt to be able to threaten knockouts on your Giratinas, as well as stuff like Gust stalling with Counter Catcher, playing an Iono, and then using Chi-Yu to start milling your deck, which is also very scary because then if you don't immediately draw an out, they put a lot of pressure on you. So this deck actually has a lot of options that's pretty annoying to deal with. And so it's definitely harder to play against, especially if your opponent isn't super experienced in the matchup. They're gonna probably forget about one of the options that you have, and then that you can lose to it. Um, I don't know. It's just overall, I think a more scary deck to play against in general because your opponent has so many more options that they can do.
Yeah. And they can
And
actually
then
get them whenever they want with the
yeah,
Pidgeot.
Pidgeot like gives them access to whatever they want. One thing I was noticing, however, is when I was playing against it, I would be like, if my opponent went for this specific play right now, that would be bad for me. But it's very hard. Like they don't always know what's going to be in your hand right every turn, so it is pretty hard for them to decide which line to go for. Right, if they want to go with the Luxray, they want to go with the mill with Chi-Yu. They want to try to go aggressive with knockouts on your attackers to force you to set up more. It is pretty hard for them to like. They won't always be able to know which play is the best one to go for, which is something I was noticing. But it is very scary to play against because it seems like they always do have a potential play they could go for that would put you in a bad spot.
I played against this deck at LEIC. It was Andrew sorry, Alessandro Premisoli, I want to say. Uh and I was playing Charizard, so I probably would have lost to either version of Stall, but he definitely got me good with that one.
Since you tested it more, Andrew, like what kind of decks, and for all of you, just what kind of decks have like what is the deck afraid of actually getting matched up into?
I assume Giratina is still not a great matchup.
Mm-hmm.
After I'd played the matchup a couple of times, I was still beating it with Giratina, which is similar to the other stall deck. Obviously,
Yep.
you have a lot of two prizes on your board, which means if they can get up the Giratina and boss up your especially if they boss up your Pidgeot quickly,
hmm
that kind of falls apart. Like I think in general, any deck that could realistically threaten to kill the Pidgeot without losing the game near the beginning is just scary. Because like stuff like Charizard, right? They can't one shot your Pidgeot. Stuff like Gardevoir, if they have to put so many energy in play to kill the Pidgeot, that they would probably lose to other stuff getting gusted up. But like decks like Giratina, deck like Miraidon or something, probably Roaring Moon as well. Any deck that could kill the Pidgeot is pretty scary to play against because your deck has so many different little pieces that if you don't have the Pidgeot in play, it's hard to pull off the strategies you want to every game.
Yeah, I think that Moon can just kind
I
of
would
run you over because you don't have Force Snorlax, so you can't lock something as easily.
Yeah.
I would say Miraidon probably the biggest matchup in particular that flips, especially if they have Spiritomb, and then they're shutting off your Rotom, and if you can't use the Pidgeot. So, and since you only have one Snorlax, the same point as Moon, um, that you're not really going to be able to stabilize very well. So I'm not sure the deck's actually better than just the normal Snorlax version because of those things.
Yeah, that's actually another point to bring up too. Is anything that has heavy path is still probably going to be pretty decent into it too. Just to shut off those Pidgeots.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting we still have paths. I'm just so focused on post rotation testing. But yeah, there's still paths. So definitely another option.
Yeah, I do think this version gets better after rotation.
Yeah.
Specifically because of Path leaving the format. But yeah, right now I would probably still go for the regular Snorlax version, like Cal's been rocking.
All right, cool. So Vancouver predictions, Gabe. What is winning Vancouver?
That is a good question. I think the best uh probably plays for the tournaments, just like win percentage wise in the meta, are probably Fusion Mew and Gardevoir. I'm gonna say Gardevoir finishes off the format with a win. I think that a lot of top players are going to bring Gardevoir. Gardevoir is pretty good into Roaring Moon. I think Roaring Moon will be the most popular deck at this tournament. I think it will surpass Charizard once again. Um, Even just go into like local cups on like the West Coast and stuff like that, which is obviously only just like a small portion of like the format, but it does show like what a lot of people are preparing for. It's just kind of been a Roaring Moon. It's just been tons of Roaring Moon. So I think that Roaring Moon will probably be the most played deck, which bodes well for Gardevoir, and also bodes decently for Fusion Mew. So I would say Gardevoir, but I think Fusion Mew is a really good play for the tournament as well.
All right, Andrew, your predictions?
I think I'm gonna have to predict Tina to be the winning deck. It was dominating the format earlier. Kind of hasn't had quite the same results recently, but it's still been seeing some amounts of success, and I think it will probably come back for a win for the last tournament of the format. I do think Guardia is still obviously very good for this tournament as well, and I think Roaring Moon will probably be the most played deck, but I wouldn't be too surprised if I saw Zard come back to the top of the meta as well.
Cool. And Nick, your predictions?
Yeah, I think also we're going to have a lot of people playing Gardevoir, top players especially. So day 2 will be pretty highly concentrated with that. And for that reason, I'm going to win with Miraidon. We're going to have a repeat of LAIC. Start the format, end the format how we started it.
Very cool. That sounds like a plan. I realize I snaked out of giving prediction last time, so I'll give my prediction. I'm going to say Fusion Mew because I think it's kind of been underrepresented for a while now in the states, and I think this is the kind of the it's like it feels like it's such a strong play that people are gonna respect it and just it's gonna lose instead. But I'm gonna say Fusion Mew. So yeah, so rotation is the next thing I wanted to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of City League results and some of the decks that have been popping off lately in City League. I don't know how much you all have been monitoring those, but I check it constantly. And I think the first one we want to talk about that we basically didn't mention at all in the last podcast was Giratina. Because this deck didn't do anything ridiculous at Champions League. I think there's one in top 16. And it wasn't really getting super played a lot after Champions League. But lately, it's just been winning a ton of City Leagues and is kind of really taking off in popularity. And there's a lot of reasons for it. One is the Iron Leaves popping up. That now that you have Iron Leaves, you just solidify your Charizard matchup so easily now. And then of course it's still Giratina. It still is good against everything. It doesn't get cheesed by anything. So yeah, what is everyone's thoughts on Giratina?
It's good. I mean, you got emergency board. That card just works really, really nicely with pretty much any deck that plays Comfy. Like Buddy Buddy Puffin is not a perfect replacement, but still is a pretty solid way to get your Comfies out onto the field. You got Prime Catcher. Prime Catcher is really the biggest thing. I think that Lost Box decks in general are very underrated right now. I think not enough people are talking about I think just like the Lost Zone engine in general and just how good it still is. And I think a big reason is because of the Prime Catcher. Prime Catcher is just such an insanely powerful card and gives you like chances to beat potentially harder matchups like Lugia V-Star, for example. Your deck does pretty good against like Charizard, kind of as you said. You got the Giratina and also Iron Leaves. You do pretty good against Arceus variants. Arceus variants are probably quite easy for you, just because you hit really good numbers against them. There's not really anything they can do to stop you, and you're still a loss on deck, so you do like decent against some of those like one prize decks still in general. I think it's still just a good deck. Like losing Path is kind of annoying because it was a way to check a lot of people's consistency. However, people are losing VIP Pass as well, so a lot of decks kind of in general are just going to be losing consistency anyways. So yeah, I think it's still really good.
Yeah, I feel like the Iron Leaves definitely is a pretty big addition. Giving you two ways to kill one-shot Charizard EXs kind of makes up for the fact that you don't have Path in that matchup anymore. obviously still like not having path means that your comeback options are going to be pretty limited, but if you can keep pace with them, and then you can use the Iron Leaves to one-shot a Charizard, and you have Star Requiem, you'll probably be fine to win the match. I think the biggest issue is not having Battle VIP Pass and instead having the Body Poffins, not being able to get out your Giratinas turn 1 or your Radiant Greninja or anything definitely hurts your consistency. I feel like getting Giratinas onto the board in general might end up being kind of a problem. So maybe you have to play a little bit differently. I don't know. I'm not entirely sure, but
Yep.
Prime Catcher is really good for the deck, like Gabe talked about, as well as the new escape board thing. I don't remember what it's called, emergency board.
Yeah.
That will definitely help you like just more easily have access to resources every turn. That will add up over the game. But I don't know. Overall, the deck will probably still be fine. I don't think it's quite as good as it is now, though. Battle VIP Pass.
I have a semi-solution to the problem of Buddy Poffin not getting Giratina. You can play a Ditto, and then you can get out your Ditto, get it into the active, turn it into a Giratina or a Cramorant to use a bit Seeking or Spin instantly. Assuming you're going second, and then if you're going first, you just forego that strategy.
But the issue is how you can't jet into Ditto because if you
we talked about this earlier.
Jet,
yeah. I mean, it's a slight downside, but then you gain the consistency of being able to draw them later in the game. So you could go, I don't need any Comphase turn 1. I'll just use Abyss Seeking, and then boom, here's 3 Comphase next turn, and just get a lost impact out of nowhere when they're not really expecting it.
Yeah, the Ditto combo's been talked about a lot, especially outside of Japan, and then like
I haven't heard anyone else say anything about it.
I see it on Twitter from time to time, but like 95% of the Japanese Lost Zone lists don't play the Ditto, and I think it is kind of just what was mentioned. Is it's kind of asking for a lot to get it in and out of the active, or if you're doing the jet thing, that's its own problem. But if you're trying to get like a Greninja or something with it, then it's not super useful.
You wouldn't use it for Greninja. You would mainly just use it for Cramorant or Giratina to attack at the end of the turn. So you just promote it at the end of the turn, transform into one of those, whichever attack you're using, turn 1 going second.
It does work with Cram, yeah, but like the jet thing is like huge for your Giratina. It's way harder to have like a switch card and an energy than to just have a jet.
Also basic energy, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, the deck's been doing fantastically in Japan still. Definitely seems like one of the top tier decks. And kind of on that note too is Charizard, which is hyped up as the S tier deck from Japan. Everyone in Japan saying it's S tier, and it's kind of shifted a little bit. Not to say that Charizard B-Barrel isn't still popular and really good, it still is, but Charizard Pidgeot's actually been taking off pretty hard over there, which is kind of surprising with how things have changed for it. But yeah, it's been doing really well in a lot of city leagues, and I know outside of Japan on Twitter, I always see people, a lot of top players are saying like, "Oh yeah, I don't know why you wouldn't play Pidgeot with Path being gone. It makes a lot of sense to play this. The consistency is just off the charts still." So yeah, I guess the way people are counteracting the no VIP for Rotom thing is just they're just playing an extra Rotom. A lot of these lists are, which I guess helps with that. And then you have the other tools like Gouging Fire EX now, just to hit for a ton of damage out of nowhere. You have this list is playing Fluttermane? What? Why are you doing
You have Maximum Belt as well.
Yeah, Maximum Belt as well.
Is terrible in general.
No,
Fluttermane should not be in any deck, on a side note. That card does not deserve to be in any deck. No, Maximum Belt's okay. Fluttermane does not deserve to be in any deck, period. It's a terrible card.
Even if Lost Box or Giratina are like number 1, number 2 decks, you still think it's not worth it?
No, it's terrible. It doesn't matter. It's like Klefki all over again. You're not actually powering that thing up to attack it.
But yeah, any thoughts on Charizard Pidgeot kind of resurging in popularity in Japan?
That deck is good. Yeah. No reason not to play it.
Mm-hmm.
The Gouging Fire is actually pretty cool. I didn't really, until recently, I hadn't really heard of that as an option, but like at the beginning of the game, when your Charizard are only doing 180 or whatever, power up a basic that can like even one-shot V-Stars, right? If you play the Choice Belt, you can do 290 for 3 energy, 1 Charizard attachment on turn 2.
Yeah, it's very easy to charge up.
To deal with. Yeah.
You can do 310 to an EX with Maximum Belt too. It's kind of cool because if you're doing basic,
jeez.
Yeah, I mean, no EXs really have 310 other than Gardevoir.
Yeah, that's like the only one, but that's probably not going to be a very large portion of the format
also,
anymore.
I like Maximum Belt in the Pidgey version in particular because you're not as reliant on like catcher, you can always quick search for boss anyway.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah, that's
the ability to be aggressive with that. I've also been trying a little bit of the Hero's Cape. So if your opponents don't have Lost Vacuum, that can be a really strong option too, to just put up a 430 HP Charizard and say, okay, can you deal with this?
Yeah, that is
And
one
then
interesting thing.
it doesn't even die to Iron Leaves then, right? So you could just
no,
sweep
it
with
doesn't.
that at
It's
the end of the
surviving.
game too. Yeah.
And something to mention too with these Ardless is the Pidgeot version specifically is probably popular in particular right now because it has a better answer for Giratina because you can just search up Mist Energy whenever they're all playing Mist Energy, so you can just attach that when you
Yep, I like
expect the
that.
Star Requiem KO. Yeah, just being able to search out
Mhm.
for whatever thing you need. Some of them are playing Airy too, which I guess makes sense. You can just quick search for that whenever and pop it.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely
I don't know
seems very
about that one,
flexible.
but
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, I was someone who played. So I was one of the many people that I think was kind of propaganded when the results first, kind of came out, thinking, oh, like the Barbero version is so good, or the Barbero version is broken. This is, like by far like the best way to play it. I have tried games with Barbero in the past, and it does not feel very good sometimes. The deck just kind of clunks. The deck plays a lot of cards that you can't easily burn as well. So yes, you do have access to School of It, but there's been plenty of times where I'll just draw these hands, or like I'll be like having a lead and then I'm just not like able to hold it. I think Pidgeot is a much more stable engine. You kind of know exactly what to expect with the deck, which I think heading into an international championship is incredibly valuable. Like last year we saw Arceus V-Star win. We saw Mew get top 4 as well. Just very consistent, straightforward decks that pretty much have the same strategy every single game. Saw, lots of success. With the Barbero version, you can feel a little bit chaotic, like just because you are like relying on like that ability, which is, a randomized ability. There will be times where you just don't find the cards that you need, or you just won't find the Arven, where with something like Pidgeot, you can just get whatever you need. So I personally prefer the Pidgeot version. I think the Pidgeot version is much better. I think that people are kind of starting to catch on to that, and we've seen the Pidgeot version see a lot more success at some of the city league championships and stuff like that. So yeah, I think they're both
I have an
solid though.
idea.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
We pull a Tord, we play a 1/1 line of each.
Yeah, I actually don't think a 1/1 beaver line in the Pidgeot version is actually that bad. That's something that actually a lot of
What you
people have been
have?
talking about on social media. It actually kind of makes sense.
Yeah, we'll pull a Tord, we'll play a 1/1 Pidgeot, 1/1 Bibbarrel. Makes perfect sense.
Sounds
Yeah,
good.
do it.
Yeah, I still
Let's
think
do it.
Viburo will definitely continue to see success, but
Yeah.
Pidgeot is also just extremely good in general with that, especially with that Path to the Peak. You have access to get whatever you want, similar to how we were talking about with the control deck earlier. Just being able to get whatever you want is just pretty good, especially when you have
Mhm.
so many different powerful cards in your deck.
Yep.
So I don't know. I
And
think
you free up
we'll
so much
probably
space compared to this format because you don't have to play Stadium.
yeah. You don't have to play like a bunch of
You get to cut a
extra
vacuum, which
slots
is
of
really
packs.
nice. You just open up an extra spot because Path does not exist, which is
Yeah.
very, very good.
Yeah, you still want to play Vacuum for random tools like
Yeah.
Maximum Balance and Hero's Cape, but you can probably just play one Vacuum, no Stadiums. You might still want Collapsed to
Yeah. I think you should still play
remove your
Collapse. Like if you
Rotom
want
or
to
your
beat Chen
Pidgeot.
Pao, you play Velocity. But...
Chenpao is another good deck.
Yeah, let's talk about Chen
Been playing
Pao.
a lot
That's
with that
another one
lately.
that has been like it's been slowly getting more popular in City Leagues. It's still like kind of the same level of popularity, but it is winning a good amount. It seems like it can handle a lot of different things pretty well. I saw you tweeted about you testing it and getting some sequencing help with that, Nick. So how are you feeling about the deck?
Yes, I really like it. It's been a lot of fun so far, learning all the ins and outs of it. I think it's probably the biggest beneficiary of what's it called, Buddy Poffin, and also one of the bigger beneficiaries of Prime Catcher as well, which are probably the two best cards to come out of the set. And then it doesn't really lose anything. It loses not having to deal with Path, which you probably still want to play 3 or 4 Pokestop anyway, but not having to draw into those, off the Roxanne or off the Iona to low is pretty huge. So I really like the deck. You get to take advantage of both Iron Hands and Cancel and Clone Greninja, and you have the one-shot attack with Chen Pao. It's really everything you could ask for. I like the deck a lot.
Yeah, Path was so annoying for Chen Pao to deal with. Decks that were just able to like go Judge Path on turn 2, your deck would oftentimes just fall apart. And Chen Pao does lose one of its harder matchups, which is Mew, because Mew like rotates, and it really is, I guess, one of the decks that really doesn't lose much of anything. Like I think Cross Switcher has always been kind of a flex spot. Yes, we do lose the VIP pass. However, we have things like the Buddy Puffin as well. You also have cards like the Iron Bundle, which kind of make up for Cross Switcher, along with also the Prime Catcher. So you really are a deck that doesn't really lose anything. And Chen Pao is a deck that when it sets up, it has pretty much outs versus every deck in the format, which I think is very, very important. I think that the deck, if you're going to play it, you need to be very experienced with it, because the deck is significantly harder than like people give it credit for. I think a lot of people who haven't necessarily played the deck at a high level just say, "Oh, it's a casino. Oh, it's just luck based and stuff like that." The deck is really hard to play. Like I've had situations where I'm like, I don't even know what the correct like sequencing is here,
Yeah.
because I could do like 5 different things, and it's just like
That was me the other night. Exactly.
exactly right. It's just like the deck's not easy to play. So I definitely recommend you put a lot of time into the deck if that's something that you're considering. But I do think it's very, very good. Pretty much what Nick said. It's probably the biggest beneficiary, or one of the biggest beneficiaries to things, like the Puffin card, and then also like Prime Catcher. I'm like just being able to use an Irida for a gust effect is just insane. Like that's just such a
Mhm.
powerful combination to have. And like you have things like the barrel as well, which is just very easily like able to access with things like the Puffin. You're just able to get Bidoofs down and stuff really consistently. It's just a
Yeah.
good deck.
What if we put a Pidgeot in this deck too?
Yeah, so that was also something I was thinking about, was because the big reason as to why Pidgeot, because like Pidgeot saw some play right when it came out in some
Right.
of the
Yeah.
Chen Pao lists. The problem was
Mhm.
is that Path just completely destroyed the combo. Like they just go Iono
Right.
Path, and your deck would just completely shut down and you couldn't do anything. Now that that's not the case, I think there actually is potentially some argument to do that. I think it could be cool.
Chen Pao has to do pretty good going into another format. Buddy Poffin is like really good for the deck in general, also because one of the issues before is if you need so many different basic Pokemon, you need multiple Bidoof, you need multiple Frigibacks, right? And so before, if you get your VIP passes turn one, you're kind of cooking. But like, say you go first, then you have an Irida in hand, but you can't get your basics down. Now you go to turn two. It's hard to get all your basics down because VIP pass isn't an option. You can Irida for like a nest ball or something, but it's gonna be hard to get your whole board set up. Your setup cooking, so
Yep.
next turn you can attack. But with Buddy Puffin now, you can easily get those basics on turn two as well. So even if you might be
Yeah.
a turn behind, but you still have the option to stay in the game and get
Yeah.
attacking on turn three. Especially, and also Buddy Puffin's playable, so if you draw it later in the game, you can still barrel for more cards. So I think
That's another huge aspect of it too, for sure, Andrew. Yeah. And then you can even keep up with the prize trade. Say you just get one Frigibax down turn one, and you're still able to evolve that turn two, plus get a secondary one and a Bidoof off the Buddy Puff in the next turn. So you're still keeping up with the prize trade while setting up your board throughout the game, rather than being so reliant on that turn one.
yeah, losing the ability to get Greninja off of it can sometimes be an issue because that could sometimes bail you out of an awkward hand turn one. But overall, it's probably a huge benefit to the deck to have Buddy Puffin over Battle VIP Pass.
Yeah.
I think if the tournament was tomorrow, I would definitely be playing Chen Pao.
That's a strong endorsement. I was gonna say, with kind of the rise, and if we do expect Qianpao and like Pidgeot stuff to be popular in general, is there any deck that should be running TM Devo that isn't currently running it in Japan?
Arc has been playing it somewhat, but I know a lot of us haven't. You can maybe play it in Arceus.
Mm-hmm.
You can go like Erie, and then you can TM Devo on the same turn, which I think is like a pretty cool play, because you can strip their rare candies potentially out of their hand, and then
Oh,
you
that's
can
gross.
also like de-evolve them. It's just an idea, but I've seen a
Yeah.
couple Arclists play, but not a whole lot. But that'd
That
be
is
the one
actually
thing.
pretty cool. Yeah. Especially if they've already used a couple rare candies, if you like discard one and TM Devo them, that could be pretty
Yeah.
devastating for a deck like
Yeah.
Charizard.
Especially if they know you play the TM Devo, they're oftentimes just going to be holding rare candies in hand. Like for example, right now in this format, typically Charizard plays the TM Devo. So oftentimes when I'm playing, versus the Charizard mirror match, I almost always have like a spare like rare candy in hand, just kind of sitting there. Just so like when they use the TM Devo, I can just go rare candy evolve attack. So just kind of like looking at that from that perspective, there definitely could be value there.
The next deck I want to talk about, which you actually brought up a little bit earlier, Gabe, was Lost Box. This is the deck that I've been primarily testing and practicing. I think the deck's incredibly strong right now, especially into a lot of the winning decks in City League. In general, the standard kind of Lost Box right now is normal one-off of attackers. Sometimes you have 2 Sableye, sometimes you have 2 Cramorant. I guess it just depends on what you're more worried about. And then Roaring Moon EX is a staple. Iron Hands EX is a staple. Sometimes the Raikou V, sometimes the Hoopa EX, which is the fighting type that uses Dark Energy to attack. Super powerful, super useful for dealing with both Iron Hands and Arceus
There's
decks.
50 times 50, right? For every energy on your opponent's
50
board.
for all energy that your opponent has in play.
Yeah, so it's good as Lugia.
Yeah, super useful. Like there's a lot of games
How do
where
you
I just
feel
like
about?
I was gonna say there's a lot of games where you just manually attach to it for 2 turns. You don't have to worry about like Mirage Gate because you can just start attacking with it immediately. It's really useful.
How do you feel about Iron Hands without Raihan? Is it not much harder to pull off?
You are burning more gates, and it does feel bad to do that. The really the biggest problem with the deck is just you only have 4 gates. So you have to be really careful with just when you use them and using it at the right time. Without Raihan, it's still like okay, it feels okay, honestly. I would like Raihan though for sure, but yeah, all the lists are playing like 4 rod now too, so usually the energy is not an issue, but the gates are really just a limiting factor because you can pretty much never like
more
bench.
Concerned about having to burn 2 gates on that.
Yeah, because you can't bench it ahead of time and attach to try to like save a gate. You basically can never get away with that. But there are a couple times where you can, but yeah, that's
Unlike
the
turn
biggest
1,
issue.
right? You
Yeah.
can put it down with an energy, and then turn 2, get to 7, gate attach. But besides that, it's probably pretty hard.
Yeah. But yeah, what is everyone's thoughts on?
But you still
Lost
think it's
Box?
worth the inclusion?
It just depends on the meta. If Arc and Iron Hands are going to be popular, then yes. But otherwise, you don't really need it for anything else. It's just a nice attacker sometimes.
Wait, what would Iron Hands do against Arceus and Iron Hand? Or are you talking about the Hoopa?
Oh, that's talking about the Hoopa. Yeah. Do you mean the Iron
I'm
Hands?
saying is Iron Hands even worth having in the deck?
Oh, yeah.
I think it is. I think you need it versus Lugia. I think you got to pull a 3-prize turn with.
What's wrong with just Raikou killing them?
I like using it in place of Raikou. Because I don't run Raikou in my version right now.
I mean, I think taking half your prize cards is just really valuable early.
Yeah.
But are you really pulling that off?
It gives you way more options than Raikou, though. Like overall,
the investment is so high. Though. Does Dragonite rotate or no?
Yes.
Yeah, Dragonite rotate.
Okay.
I think it's worth it. I mean, I actually did some testing with Lugia versus like the Turbo Box with the things like the Hoopa and the Iron Hands. And the Iron Hands was, like actually like coming up. And the Hoopa actually surprised me. I actually didn't even know what the card did until they played it down versus me. And I was like, oh, this card's actually really, really good against Lugia.
Yeah.
I guess you can arm press. You can arm press still.
Yeah, arm press.
you
gets used honestly pretty often against a lot of things. I like. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting things you can do with it. The biggest problems with Lost Box is like Great Tusk and anything that has 140 HP single prize attackers like the Ancient Box stuff. That's pretty bad. Control stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is still pretty bad. It gets worse because of Eerie. Well, it used to be kind of okay, and now it's just worse with Eerie in general. But
sure.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on Lost Box?
I would think Raikou would be better into like Lugia specifically. Oh, I was gonna say I wouldn't worry too much about the Great Tusk, but I do think the Baby Roaring Moon is a very good attacker that could be a problem for you.
That's an issue for like Giratina as well, I think, right? Like
and Chen Pao, yeah. You don't have a good way to deal with it really.
Because they can capsule it.
Not even that, just 140 base is strong.
Like anything 130
That's
or
one
more.
of my favorite cards from this set as well. Is the Baby Roaring Moon. I don't like the Koraidon. I would just play Baby Roaring Moon with Roaring Moon,
Yeah, that's the deck that all of us have been playing like 2 to 4 Flutter main, by the way, so I'm sure you'll love that.
Well, that's only because it's just like you just need a Pokemon that has like 1 retreat cost. So like if you started, it's not the end of the world, and you can just pretty much toss them all away. That's like literally the reason as to why the deck doesn't play like 4 Tusk, is because Tusk has like a 3 retreat cost. So like you never really want to start the card, which is why there's only typically 1 in the list. Like it's not necessarily.
It's even worse than Flutter, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't do very. Yeah, it's.
But they just need more ancient cards to discard or whatever, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I don't think you need that many ancient cards. You can be content 2-shotting your opponent, and they just use Roaring Moon EX on whatever their big guy is.
You have to build a list completely different than a lot of the other ones that are seeing success, though.
Yeah, no, I don't think most of them play like the EX Roaring Moon.
Yeah, there's a good amount that do. Yeah, there's the one I'm looking at right now that won a City League is 4 of the baby moons, 3 of the EXs, and then 4 flutter mains and Greninja, and that's
Okay,
it.
I think that's kind of a different version of the deck. Then,
Yeah,
actually.
there's
Take that, cut the flutter mains, you have a good deck.
How much do you do with that then? If you have, so it's like
10
a couple
damage if you don't go
moons
for
and
it.
then 8 supporters that are ancient, 4 vessels, 4 capsules, right? So yeah, you can still get up to like
Yeah,
220,
plenty.
right?
I actually think that the Baby
You
Roaring
can
Moon
hit
deck
220 at the end,
is good.
yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the deck is actually really good. I think that people are underrating the Baby Roaring Moon deck. I think it has a lot of potential. I just think a one prizer that can with capsule get to like what is it 180
200.
with
Yeah,
capsule?
200.
It's just like
It has 140 base.
oh yeah, cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, like
It's
but
very good, yes.
yeah, that's just insane. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's really good. It's just a little clunky at times. I think that's like the only issue with the deck is that the deck plays kind of a bunch of junk cards. So, kind of like what Nick said, maybe you could kind of like retool it and
Yeah.
kind of cut the bad cards
Take
potentially.
out the junk cards and just put in better cards, and then your deck will be good.
It's so simple, Nick.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah, that's one of those decks where it's like if it was
That's-
really popular, I would almost want to consider just throwing in the future capsule into like Lost Box. Just get the Iron Hands knockout with it on one of the baby moons. It is kind of a tricky combo to pull up, but they're also never hand disrupting you, so I guess it's fine. You just wait till you have a vacuum and the capsule, and then you pop it. So that could be an option if that deck does really take off in popularity. Same with Ancient Box and I guess Great Tusk as well. But on that, it seems just like tough for a lot of these decks to deal with. Any
What do
other?
we think about the Turbo Iron Hands?
It seems okay. It just
We can
depends
go
on
into
like
that.
what's popular, honestly. If it's good matchups are there, and like I do think
It's Lugia, that's what it does.
it sure
That matchup is
does.
free.
Yeah,
Yeah, let me
it's
see if I can
one
pull up a
matchup.
recent list.
It's one good matchup is that and it's an auto win.
Oh, people have been
I think the
including
way
the
to
Iron
play it-
Boulder with it. I don't understand what that's for. The
For
Iron Boulder
Arceus,
EX.
probably. You probably want to boulder the arc. I don't know.
Because it only does
I think
60.
the way to play it would be put some Raichus in there.
Yeah.
And then you have the tool that says when you get knocked out, move 3 energy to the bench. So you just go like arm press early or amp early. And then you have Raichu. I was confused those two.
You can go into Raichu, but you
Raichu
need
at the
to
end.
a way to power up another attacker. So like you would kind of have to close with Raichu is for your last 2.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying for the closer. Yeah.
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 Then you have the item that gets 1 from your discard for all your guys. Reboot pod. Yeah, you could do that with Raichu. I think that could be good.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit on
Untested,
the last
but it
pod.
sounds good in theory.
I did actually play the Raichu with the Seal Stone on my tabletop matches with Jake. So if anyone wants to check that out, it is on the YouTube DDG channel. I did not get to use it a single time,
Sounds good.
but I think I've only used
No?
it. I've used the Raichu literally one time in testing, just because with the baton, like it is nice to have that, but generally a lot of the times, like I want to use the Raichu the same turn I bench it. Is just kind of what happens naturally a lot of the time, and that's really hard to do because you have to get
So
a
then you have
generator
to
hit.
save a generator.
Yeah. And if you make it like your late game play, the odds of getting that generator hit that late are pretty low because you probably burn a lot of energy at that point. So you kind of need the baton and having it in play
Sure.
early. It's tough, but
You
it's
could play
definitely
multiple, and then
Yeah.
that would kind of
Yeah, you
protect
could play
you.
2.
But yeah.
I would
Yeah.
probably play 2.
yeah. I think that
And
makes a
then
lot of sense.
getting access to forces actually sounds really good. So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
hate that in general.
Because you're probably already playing a high Arvin count already, right?
I think like at least 2. Yeah, is pretty normal. No,
yeah,
4. Yeah,
having
4.
4 seems really good.
Yeah. Yeah, heavy Arvin, heavy research, all that stuff. Yeah, I think it's honestly like pretty solid. And just being able to hit super hard and like against Zard, you can just 2-shot it and take 3 prizes, totally fine. And if Pidgeot's popular, it's really good against that too. So even more reason to play it if
Yeah,
that's
because you're able to
there.
amp that for a 1-shot with the Iron Crown.
Yep. Iron Crown or booster, yeah, super easy.
And how many of the baby Miraidon you're playing? That one gets 2 energy out, right? From
Yeah,
the
it
deck?
gets 2. Yep. And you usually run 2, yeah.
So you want to use that like turn 1, right?
Yep, so you get a
Yeah.
free knockout with that, and then you can amp for a Zard for 3 more, and then just amp whatever else after, and you're good. I think, yeah, the list in Japan, I think, can still be refined quite a bit. I do like the Raichu a lot. We'll see what happens with the list as it actually comes out here. And then, yeah, I think the next thing I want to talk about for rotation is control. Maddox DCG asked from Twitter, How much should players be worried about stall control in the new format for EUIC or Orlando? And if you have an idea of like meta share of what to expect, what do you think? Because like everyone, I feel like, is really hyping it up to be like S tier, like way better than currently because of Erie in particular. So what do y'all think?
Yeah, I'm definitely more worried about it now than I am. Sorry, I'm definitely more worried about it moving into EUIC than I am currently.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So at the Champions League, I have never, or I don't know if they published this publicly, but I don't know if they posted like the actual meta shares of decks because maybe Lugia was like a really small portion of the meta and it just did like really well, which caused like Control to do well just because there wasn't a whole lot of Lugia. But I think that Lugia is going to be the first or second most played deck. And has
Sure.
heavy jet energies. It has collapsed stadium as well. It can attack with pretty much everything. So for example, myself, I don't think I'm going to go into that tournament playing Control saying that I take a rough matchup to, arguably the most popular or second most popular deck. Also,
Sure.
with people starting to realize that Giratina is still a very, very good deck as well, that matchup has kind of always been a very sketchy matchup. I think that Control gained a lot of cards, but it also gained a pretty tough matchup in Lugia. So having Lugia and
Sure.
also Lasso and Giratina as problems because like in this format, like as of right now, like pre-rotation, like the one big matchup that like Control really wants to avoid is the Giratina matchup. Like a top tier deck can get away
Right.
with, one like pretty rough matchup. I don't know if it can be a top tier deck if it has rough matchups against the arguably expected first or second most played deck, and then another deck that will probably take up, I would say Giratina will reasonably take up 8 to 9% of the format. Like that seems very,
Sure.
very risky. So, that's personally my issue. I think the deck got, like fundamentally better, but its matchup spread actually got worse.
Yeah, I
Right.
actually
Yeah,
don't think
Lugia matchup is not good at all.
Yeah.
your Giratina matchup is probably not as bad as you're thinking. I don't think Giratina will play as many stadiums now, right? Because it doesn't have
Mm,
path anymore. And so if you could
Yep.
potentially play Sinnoh, stick their jet energies, and you also have
Yep.
Erie for their switch cards. So I think you could actually
Yep.
probably beat that matchup way more often. I think Lugia kind of becomes the new Giratina in terms of your matchup spread. They do play like maybe like one or two minions you could trap, but it's going to be pretty hard to do that, especially if they get to the end of the game. There's no Echo Horn, so if they just discard them near the end of the game, you have to spend a whole turn Mantine, like using Mantine on it, and they could potentially set up
Yep.
checkmate before that. So
Because they still have collapsed plus jet to get out of it, and you can't really deal with that unless you're Luxray,
I also
well,
don't
like
think Arctina is a good
which then
matchup
is
either.
giving up two
So.
prizes.
you can't jet and then cost if Sinnoh is in play. But yeah,
No,
like
collapsed and then jet to take a knockout.
sure, yeah. But you can't get your wing
So
off
you
the
can do
board.
that
But yeah,
twice if you have two
if you
collapse.
have a collapse or
So
two left, yeah, you can
yeah,
get some.
so if you take 4 prizes before Lumini gets into play, you win, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree with that. Especially because there's no Sydney, I don't think. They don't have a way to
There's
discard
not,
your
no, they're
stadium.
rotated. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can't discard stadium or special energy from hand.
Yeah, so I think Lugia will become a
Except
way tougher
Luxray.
matchup. Yeah,
But then you
Lux.
can just retreat. So
I don't think they'll be playing. Well, I mean, I guess they could play the Luxor version. I don't know. I think overall
yeah,
Lugia
the
is gonna
pitch
be
out
really,
version would be playing one.
but and also Arctina is probably not a great matchup. I think I talked about that some last time, but they have
Is that deck
judges, they
actually
have
good?
switches. I don't know. It got played in Japan. I'm not sure how good it is. Has lots of options.
It's not
Pretty
that good to
interesting.
me.
Are you a hater? Are you a hater, Nick? Arctina?
It just doesn't sound that good to me. I don't know.
It's never sounded that good though, but it has done well before.
That is true.
That's true.
I think Artina's fine. And just yeah, kind of just depends on other factors outside of it. I'd probably be more inclined to play other arc pile to try to counter the meta more pointedly, I guess.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
agree.
Arctina just gets rolled by Lugia. Like, well,
yeah,
like your only
that's the
bet
big
is
thing.
to like judge them or like try and use um something like the Erie, excuse me, to be able to like stop them. So like that's like the only thing. But like not having path stinks.
Yeah,
That's like
without
a
path, it's
really,
awful.
really bad thing. Like that's what made the deck like pretty relevant in the past is that you had,
Exactly.
Judge Path Trinity Nova, which was just that carried so many Arceus decks. I mean, so many Arceus decks I've seen
Yeah.
success with Path. So it's gonna be interesting to see without it to see if it's still good.
And without the path too, people are just kind of shoving in more consistency cards, but you don't really that doesn't fix the problem of the deck of like some of the bad matchups
Right.
too. So maybe people
Yeah, it's
scale
just the
that
low
back for like
power level
matchup
is the
specific
issue.
stuff. Yeah.
Well, like another problem is that more of them are cutting like their vacuums and their path outs for more consistency cards in general. So like we'll see decks like Charizard, for example. Charizard doesn't need to play as many like stadium cards, and then they don't need to play, let's say, the double lost vacuum, and they can just play more consistency cards, which in turn also hurts Arceus's entire strategy, which is to judge and brick them, or to use the new supporter as well to brick them. So there's a couple problems that we're kind of running into in Arceus deck.
Yeah, makes sense.
It is interesting. We're kind of going back in time with Lugia and Arceus and
Yeah.
Lost Box being some of the deck.
Yeah, this is gonna date how fresh I am to the game, but I my first event ever was Salt Lake City 2022. That was my first like official TPCI match, and I played Arctina to that, so that was a pretty long time ago at this point.
2 was
You mean the like the
was when
October one?
Giratina came out.
Yeah, the October one,
Right
that
when Giratina
Art
came
Gudra
out, yeah,
one.
the one I top
Yeah.
4 with Tina. Yes, I got top 4 with Giratina. That's right.
Very nice, very nice. Nice flex.
That was without Path to the Peak, by the way. So I think Giratina is still good even without Path.
So
yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking when I was looking at the new list. I was like, this is kind of like what Giratina had to be like back in the day. You had to have more aggression. You couldn't rely on Path for disruption to slow them down.
So yeah, meta share percentage you think for control at EUIC? What do y'all think? We'll lump in stall and control as one combined meta share.
I don't think it can be that high. Maybe like 6%. I don't know.
I'm
6
saying
is way higher than like any events
max.
now. Yeah.
No one actually wants to like.
Bro,
I don't know.
Like,
Like,
bro,
nobody
that's
wants
like
to
the
play
play rate of
control.
Mew, bro. Like in this, like he's not gonna be as popular as Mew.
I do think more people would be interested in playing control versus stall, because I think the control is just a lot more active, a lot more. You can just actually take prizes and do.
But the deck
stuff
is
with
harder
it.
to play. So
It
I
is
think that
harder to
less
play.
people
That's
will
true.
play it.
Yeah. I'm gonna
I
say
think
5%.
Control has actually seen less play than stall.
I think people actually test against it for this event, which is like, I feel like a lot of people just ignore control in general, but with how much hype it's gotten, I think people actually try to make sure their deck has an answer and they have some practice in the matchup.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, like it just kind of has like those like major swings, right? It's either like really good because like no one teched for it, and then everyone techs for it, and the next event it's completely terrible. I think that actually control might be a little bit better for Orlando, because like maybe something happens where like everyone techs like for control at like EUIC, the deck does terrible, and then everyone cuts their techs or cuts the switch card or something like that, and then control sees a lot of success at Orlando and Perth, which is the weekend right after like EUIC. So that's also kind of interesting to look at too. But I don't know. I don't think control will be more than 4%.
Sanders going to come up with something crazy. I think Sanders going to come up with something crazy and make top 8. He's been cooking the last 3 months for this event. He's been preparing.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other rotation stuff we want to get into before we go over the mailbag questions to end off the pod? Cool. We'll go over it again. We'll have one more podcast before. Let me think. So, our next podcast will be 2 weeks from now. So that will be after Vancouver, but a week and a half before EUIC. So we'll have one more chance to talk about it and go in depth on our thoughts and everything. And at that point, the set will actually be out too. So more people will have their hands on it. So going into questions from Twitter, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but Anthem Maxwell asking, how real is Ancient Box real? How real is it? Should we be afraid?
The current lists I'm seeing are not good. The deck is good if it's optimized.
Yeah, and to be clear, the Ancient Box would not be. I guess specifically Ancient Box is referring to the one with Koraidon and the baby Roaring Moon, not the Roaring Moon EX list.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be though.
Yeah.
I think like the baby Roaring Moon, as we've talked about, is like a really good attacker, and I think there will be some deck that plays it and it does really well, and I'm not entirely sure if it will just be the one prize Ancient Box deck.
I think the one prize.
I don't think the Koraidon's that good. I don't like the Koraidon.
It's not necessarily there because it's a great attacker.
150?
It's just there because you got to discard it. Like
That's a terrible reason to play a card.
that is not a terrible reason to play a card when your attack is like does more for how many of those terrible cards you discard. Like you have to play more of those.
Like Lampent wasn't a good card, but Night March played
yeah. Like Lampent was a horrible card. Like it was like it never attacked.
But like
that's a terrible argument.
20 times when we had half the amount of HP, and now it's doing 10 plus. So it's not that good.
Yeah, but it's 70
You also
plus.
don't
That's like
have
a pretty
Battle
good
Compressor.
starting point. It's not like Vespa Queen, which was 20 plus.
Right. So you don't need to be hitting. Anyway, the Koraidon's not it. I don't want to fighting energy.
I don't think Koraidon's good either. I'm just saying that I think that you got to play some stuff.
Right, so you replace those with 4 Roaring Moon EX, and you can discard those instead, and it's actually a good attacker.
I guess. I mean, if you want to play Dark Patch too.
Yeah, that's true. You can put in the dark patches.
You should be playing Dark Patch anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess.
Otherwise, you have to Sada every turn or every other turn.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
I mean, I personally am a fan of Dark Patch. I also am not a big fan
Yeah.
of the artisan variants. I think the artisan variants are not good. I think that you should just be playing Pokestop. Pokestop makes way too much sense in the deck. Like that
Definitely,
card is literally
definitely.
built for that deck. I do
Yeah.
not think that you should play a single artisan. You should just play 3 or 4 Pokestop and just kind of turbo through your deck.
Yep.
That's how I think the deck should be played. Because like, I might discard a couple ancient Pokemon plus 20 or 30.
Nice.
This makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, actually, on that note
Definitely.
too, we didn't talk about it last time, but Future Box is technically a different deck from Turbo Iron Hands. Have any of you tried it? Any thoughts on it?
I haven't tried it.
What do you mean by Future Box? Like, what is that?
Just a combination of all the different future attackers.
It's like the Iron Leaves. It's
yeah,
just like
heavy
the
Iron
box deck.
Leaves.
It has like answers to everything.
Iron Leaves. I mean,
Plays
What's
all the
the
We've
single
engine
seen
prize
these decks
ones.
before. They have not done well. We've seen these pile decks before. They typically do not do very well.
Let me see if I can
Like,
find
what
one that
are
actually
what's
won
the
a
engine to
series.
power up your attackers with this deck?
Literally the
the-
Miraidon. It's
Miraidon.
like you spend an entire turn using the Miraidon to power up your Iron Leaves you play against Charizard and stuff like that. Like that's kind of the general strategy, and then you pretty much
And then they
entirely
just
rely on like the
and
reboot pod.
then
How do you power up like attackers throughout the game? How do you like chain attackers?
reboot pod, I guess.
Reboot
right?
pod and pray.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound too great to me. But.
Yeah, I can't find a good example of this, which means it hasn't won a City League like at all, but or at least
Probably a good reason
recently.
for that.
But it's something that
People have been
are
hyping it up because
mentioning.
it's got a lot of
Too.
colors and it looks cool. There's a lot of cool, like really cool, like full arts and alternate arts that make the deck look beautiful, but it's not.
I think the ancient
Well,
stuff has a lot more
I saw
potential.
someone post that picture. It looked terrible. They were like, "Oh, this deck looks so good with all these full arts." It did not look good.
Oh my god.
So yeah, so next question then from Lucy First. Thoughts on Guardy post rotation? Is Drifloon viable at all with so much like lost vacuum in the presumably a lot of lost vacuum in the format? We're not seeing a lot of lost vacuum now, but I do think lost vacuum will probably be a good card at EUIC.
Now. I think there'll be less than in the current format though.
Yeah, but I mean like compared to like City League now, like right now the City Leagues and Champions League they're not that much vacuums honestly. A lot
That's
of decks
what I'm saying. I don't think it's as big as it is currently.
The issue is Charizard will like almost always include one, and then your Charizard matchup gets so much worse because they can take like 3 prize turns, right?
Yeah, that doesn't sound good.
If they take an early prize and they go vacuum off Drifloon and boss the EX, that gets pretty bad.
It's just over.
Yeah, that sounds tough.
Yeah. So I don't know. That seems like a pretty problem that I don't know if there's a good solution for. Would be the Charizard matchup, assuming they have a lost vacuum.
Right.
Yeah, I think that Gardevoir is an insane card. I think that Refinement is also a very good ability. I think that we're gonna have to wait a couple of sets for us to get some more psychic support, and then I think like the deck will become like potentially very strong again because the engine is just too powerful. Like Gardevoir, like Psychic Embrace is like one of the best abilities ever put on a Pokemon. So I think that if we get some more stuff over time, I don't think it's a terrible deck. I think it's okay. Like I think that like you have Hero's Cape and Cape of Toughness as well, right? So or the other cape card, I forget what it's called. I never played in Gardevoir.
Luxurious.
Yes, the Luxurious Cape. You have both of those, but yeah, the Charizard matchup does not seem good if they play vacuum, which I think is a huge issue. And like obviously losing Refinement just means you're naturally more clunky.
You keep Refinement, right? You lose Mirage Step.
You lose Mirage Step, you keep Refinement, and you lose Shining Arcana. I don't know if I said Refinement. I meant Shining Arcana.
Yeah. Losing Step is pretty bad, right?
And Arcana,
yeah. Obviously, Arcana's like the worst one, because that's like your best.
Losing Arcana is way bigger because you can't use Reversal, because Reversal is still legal.
Yeah.
And like you still have things also like the Mimikyu to replace the Zacian, which is like kind of nice, but you just have no way to one-shot a Charizard with an attacker they like have to deal with. I think that's why
that they
like,
can't use a
so
vacuum on to kill.
Correct. Yeah. They have to spend a turn taking out a 1 prize, which is a huge issue.
Makes sense.
If vacuum ends up coming out of lists, I think it could be good.
Yeah, if Charizard for some reason cuts lost vacuum, I think then you might have a chance. You might have something then.
I don't know if we're gonna see lost vacuums getting cut though with ace specs existing. But yeah.
Well, if everyone's just playing Prime Catcher, right?
I guess so. Yeah, if that happens. Or what's the new one that they announced that everyone was freaking out about?
The reset stamps. That's not till next set,
Oh,
though.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Next question, also from Anthem Maxwell. This is actually a question for all of you because I think I've seen all of you, especially like last season and this season too, kind of fall into this. How do you commit to a deck for a long time without getting bored of it?
I like winning personally.
This is the answer I expected. I'm not surprised.
That's a good question. I
Yeah.
think that we've all three of us have kind of ran decks kind of into the ground tournament after tournament after tournament. I I don't know. I think that for me, locals kind of makes it a little bit more refreshing because sometimes I'll go to locals and play like a bunch of like different decks, or like when I'm playing like an online tournaments, I'll try out like all different things. And I play so much Pokemon in general that I don't just play the same deck over and over and over again. Like I play like Pokemon for fun as well, because I just like to enjoy playing. But I think that I think the challenge to be the best at something, I think, is very like motivating. For example, I've been playing a lot of Gardevoir recently. I know that like Hedrick's been playing a lot of like Lost on Giratina. Moppa's been playing a lot of like the Miraidon variants, and I think that mastering those archetypes is a challenge, like that I personally like really like to enjoy. Like I like really like working on a deck and like continuously seeing like um plays that I might not have seen like a couple. I mean, like months ago, like I remember when I got top 8 at Brisbane, I look back at that and I was like, dang, I played horribly. Like I was I did I did not play, like very well in certain games, like throughout that tournament. And now like I look back at it and I was like, cool, this is actually like really cool because I've learned so many new things, how to sequence, like differently in certain situations, how to approach different matchups. And I personally find that very rewarding. So, that's kind of like my answer is that, seeing the improvement over time is like definitely something that I like a lot.
Yeah, I think along with what Gabe was saying, like you can sometimes try out other decks, especially like if you have the deck you've been committing to for a while, playing games against that deck with other decks that like you're kind of struggling with that matchup or whatever, then you get to see a different perspective, right? And see how that deck plays against it. And then you can maybe see kind of some of the weaknesses that that deck has in the matchup. And then you can go back to your deck and you can kind of like learn how to exploit some of the problems with that deck, which is pretty interesting. It gives you a different perspective, lets you play a different deck, and also helps you learn about the deck that you've been committing to for a while. And I would say also make sure like the deck that you commit to is actually one that you enjoy playing. Like if you're committing to a deck that just doesn't really make that much sense to you, right? You don't really like playing it. It's going to be a lot harder to play it tournament after tournament and learn more from it.
Yeah, I used to switch decks a lot more often. And then I think I started doing better when I realized I could just stick with the same thing and learn that. And
Yeah. Overall, it's better to just like learn one or two decks, I feel like, than try to master a bunch of different decks.
Mhm.
You're going to have better results
Mhm.
just sticking with one or two.
Obviously, if the format changes, then you might have to reevaluate things.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think I definitely made a mistake in Knoxville playing Gardevoir instead of Miraidon, even though Gardevoir ended up winning the tournament. Right, I wasn't experienced enough in the mirror match, or just in general. Like round 3 against Mew, I got myself a double prize penalty because I used concealed cards under Path to the Peak, even though I had an artisan in hand. And it's just things like that that you wouldn't make those mistakes if you were playing the deck that you knew super well.
Sure.
And then
Yeah.
against the Gardevoir mirror later on the last 2 rounds, I just had no idea what I was doing, and got punished pretty hard for that.
Gotcha. Really quickly, are you all doing Vancouver?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
No.
No. Okay, so no Nick, but Gabe and Andrew. So everyone watching, be
I
sure
said
to.
yes.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Next
Did
one.
somebody say? Did anyone say no?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, you're all going. Okay, cool.
We're all going.
Okay, awesome. Be sure to cheer on Gabe, Andrew, and Nick at Vancouver Regionals. One of them will win for sure. All of them will make top 8. It'll be very exciting to see. Thank you all so much for watching this episode of the Dead Draw Gaming Podcast. Special thanks to our sponsors, Dual Spec and Cutter Tap. And we'll be back again in about 2 weeks. Again, any feedback at all about these episodes, anything you want to see for these, please let us know in the comments below. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. We would really appreciate it. I'm glad Andrew has reverted back to the spooky lighting. Never mind, it's back. And that's going to be it for this episode. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Take care.